Have you ever caught yourself saying, one day I'll really start living? What if that day never comes? Unless you make it today? What if the smallest change could pull you out of survival mode and place you back into the center of your own life? The fifth habit might sound simple, almost too small to matter, but it was the one that gave me my voice back. And once I found it, everything else began to shift. Stay with me until the end. I promise it's the kind of shift that doesn't fade overnight. There's a strange kind of ache that comes from standing still while your soul keeps walking. You wake up, go through the motions, tick off the check boxes, and yet, something inside you whispers, this isn't it. Not quite. It's like you're waiting for your real life to start. Maybe when you finally get that job, move to that city, lose that weight, meet that person. You hold your breath through your days, saving your energy for later, for someday, for the version of you who has it all figured out. But the waiting becomes a way of life. And after a while, the days stop feeling like possibility and start feeling like placeholders. You're here, but not really. Smiling in photos, but hollow behind the eyes, promising yourself you'll change, but never quite moving. And deep down, the question echoes louder. What if this is it? What if the moment you're waiting for is actually waiting for you? If this already spoke to something in you, like it did in me, like subscribe and stay close, you're not alone. If that sounds like you, I want you to know there's nothing wrong with you. You're not lazy, you're not broken, you're not behind. You've just been carrying a story that told you your real life starts after something, after achievement, after approval, after certainty. But that story is heavy, isn't it? And exhausting, because it asks you to perform in a life that doesn't feel like yours yet. It's not your effort that's missing. It's that you've been putting that effort into waiting, into overthinking, self-editing, surviving, and no one taught you how to simply begin. No one gave you permission to feel alive while still being a work in progress. But what if I told you that you don't need permission? That change doesn't come in a thunderclap, but in small, quiet decisions you repeat until you stop waiting and start showing up. That's what this video is about. Not becoming someone else, but remembering you were allowed to live like you already belong in your own story. Today, I'm going to share with you 5 small habits that help me stop waiting and start living. They're not grand, they're not complicated, but they're powerful because they shift the story you tell yourself about who you are and what you're allowed to reach for. Each one is something I've tested in my real, messy, beautifully unfinished life here in Vermont. These aren't tips you'll forget by tomorrow. They're practices that quietly rewire your relationship with your own future. You don't need a new career, a new relationship, or a new city to feel alive. What you need is a handful of intentional choices that signal to your mind and your heart, we're not waiting anymore. You can do these habits no matter where you are, how much time you have, or how broken you feel. Because the truth is, change doesn't start with the life you build. It starts with how you show up in the life you already have. Let's begin with the first one. This isn't about reinventing yourself overnight. This is about finding your way back. Back to the spark you lost somewhere between expectations and exhaustion. These habits aren't about hustle, they're about healing. They don't ask you to become extraordinary. They ask you to show up, gently but deliberately in the quiet corners of your day. Think of this not as a transformation, but as a reunion with the part of you that's still dreaming. The part of you that remembers how it feels to care, to try, to believe. You're not here to prove yourself. You're here to meet yourself again, one small step at a time. So breathe, drop your shoulders, and let's walk into the first habit together. Not because your life depends on it, but because maybe, just maybe, your joy does. I didn't think changing my clothes could change my life. I really didn't. I used to believe outfits were for the world out there. Interviews, dates, social posts. Not for me, especially not on those quiet mornings when I had nowhere to be but the kitchen table and my laptop. Why bother dressing up for a day that would look like every other? But one afternoon in early spring, something shifted. I had just come back from a walk around the block in sweatpants and a faded hoodie, my usual uniform for days I wasn't expecting much from. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror and saw someone tired, invisible. Not because I looked bad, but because I looked like someone in hiding. And that broke something open in me. The next morning, I tried something new. I reached for an outfit that reminded me of the version of myself I always imagined I'd become. The version that wrote books, spoke on stages, felt quietly powerful. I wasn't going anywhere. No one would see me. But I saw me, and that mattered. I wore dark jeans, a crisp white blouse, and a delicate gold necklace I hadn't touched in years. I made coffee in that outfit. I answered emails. I took a call. And something in me sat up straighter. This habit, dressing as the person you want to become, isn't about aesthetic. It's about intention. It tells your brain, we're already there. It interrupts the signal of nothing matters today and replaces it with this moment matters. Researchers at Northwestern University coined the term enclothed cognition to describe this. The idea that what you wear changes not just how others see you, but how you see yourself. Participants in lab coats performed better on attention-related tasks because they believed they were more focused. The same is true for us. When you wear clothes that align with who you want to be, you invite your mind to meet you there. And it's not about dressing up. It's about dressing on purpose, even if you're staying in. Especially if you're staying in, because that's when the temptation to disconnect from yourself is strongest. Try it tomorrow. Choose one outfit that makes you feel clear, grounded, or inspired. Even if it's just a clean t-shirt and your favorite jeans. Even if no one sees it but you. Let your mirror reflect the person you're becoming, not just the one surviving the day. Because the way you dress is not about impressing the world. It's about signaling to yourself. I'm not waiting anymore. There's a drawer in my apartment that used to hold the life I thought I didn't have time for. Inside it, a sketchbook with half-finished drawings, a dusty harmonica, and a folded piece of paper that once held the outline of a children's story I swore I'd finish someday, but someday kept getting postponed. I told myself I was too tired, too busy, too behind on everything else. And slowly, I forgot that those things weren't hobbies. They were pieces of me, the me I liked, the me that felt most awake. It wasn't until I started a quiet ritual, just 20 minutes a week, that things began to shift. One Sunday afternoon, I pulled out that sketchbook and set a timer. Not to be productive, not to finish anything, just to reconnect. And in those 20 minutes, I didn't feel like someone waiting for life to begin. I felt like someone in it, present, alive, choosing joy with no ROI. It sounds small, but it was the first time in months I felt like myself again. The second habit is this. Spend 20 minutes per week doing something that lights you up, even if you're bad at it, even if it leads nowhere, especially if it leads nowhere. In a culture that measures worth and output, choosing passion for passion's sake is a quiet rebellion. It reminds you that your life is not a to-do list. It's a story, and you get to choose moments that exist just because they make you feel good to be alive. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who studied the concept of flow, found that people experience their deepest states of happiness and fulfillment when they're immersed in activities that challenge and absorb them. Not scrolling, not zoning out, but creating, exploring, expressing, and it doesn't have to be profound. You can paint, garden, learn chords on a guitar, write a silly poem, dance barefoot in your living room. What matters is that it's yours, that it's not for anyone else, that it doesn't need to become something to be valuable. 20 minutes. That's all, less than 1% of your week. But the ripple it creates is bigger than you can imagine, because it reminds your brain that you are not just a worker, a fixer, a provider, a planner. You're a person with interests, edges, and spirit. You're someone who deserves to enjoy the process of being human. Try it. This week, pick one thing you've missed or always wanted to try. Give it just 20 minutes. Not to master it, but to feel more you again. Which of these first two habits sparks something in you? I'd love to know. Drop a comment and tell me what it made you remember about yourself. There was a time I stopped talking about my dreams. Not because I didn't have them, but because it hurt too much to say them out loud. Saying them made me feel foolish, like I was setting myself up for failure. So instead, I buried them under work, chores, and scrolling. I told myself I'd get back to them when I had more time, more clarity, more courage. But dreams don't wait for the perfect moment. They shrink in silence. They vanish when ignored. And one Sunday, sitting in my car outside a grocery store, I realized if I didn't take even one small step soon, I was going to lose something precious. Not just the dream, but my belief in it. That night, I opened the Notes app on my phone and wrote just one thing I could do that week to move closer to my dream. Nothing big, just something real. One email, one book chapter, one website to research. That was it. And the next Sunday, I did it again. A habit was born, not of action, but of honoring what matters. The third habit is this. Every Sunday, plan one tiny step toward a dream. Not 5, not a whole plan, just one intentional move. Why Sunday? Because it's the threshold between what was and what could be. And choosing to care about your dream before the week begins sends a message to your future self. I didn't forget you. And why only one step? Because that's how momentum is built, through movements so small they don't trigger resistance. According to Stanford behavioral scientist B.J. Fogg, the smaller the habit, the more likely it is to stick. Tiny steps bypass overwhelm. They make the impossible feel doable. You don't have to know how your dream will unfold. You don't need a timeline or a guarantee. You just need to prove to yourself over and over that you're willing to show up, that your dream is not too big, and you are not too late. One step, every Sunday. It could be reaching out to someone you admire, sketching an idea, practicing a skill, blocking off time, even if it only takes 5 minutes. Because the dream isn't in the result, it's in the return, the returning to yourself, the returning to that spark that says, maybe I was meant for more than surviving. So this Sunday, ask yourself, what's one thing I can do that will make my future self proud I didn't give up? Write it down, set a reminder, and then do it. Even if it's awkward, even if it's quiet, even if no one claps, because this is how the wait ends. Not with a leap, but with a step. The fourth habit feels almost like a game, but it's one that rewires your mind from the inside out. It started for me on a rainy Tuesday in Seattle. I was sitting at my kitchen counter with a cup of peppermint tea, staring at a blank journal page, feeling like I had nothing new to say. I was tired of writing about the same problems, the same self-doubt, the same maybe next time script. So I tried something different. I wrote as if it were already true. I wrote, "Today I woke up in my tiny lakeside home, poured coffee, and felt a deep calm because I'm finally living what I used to only imagine." And for a few minutes, I believed it. That's the fourth habit. Journal as if you were already living your dream life. Not to fake it, but to feel it. To let your nervous system experience the reality before the reality arrives. Neuroscience calls this mental rehearsal, and athletes use it all the time. Visualization activates the same neural pathways as real experience. When you write in vivid detail about your ideal life, your brain starts adjusting its internal compass toward that direction. You begin to embody it. Your choices shift, your energy changes, your language softens. Because your mind no longer sees the dream as fantasy. It starts to see it as familiar. In those 5-minute journal entries, I became someone who made time for herself, someone who finished projects, someone who felt joy not as a rare visitor, but as a permanent resident. I wrote about mornings filled with meaning, conversations that nourished me, and work that felt aligned. And slowly, my actual mornings started to echo what I had written. Not perfectly, but intentionally. The journaling helped me name what I wanted, and when you can name something, you can start creating space for it. You don't have to be a writer. You don't need the perfect notebook. You just need a willingness to imagine, clearly, specifically, and with love. Describe the version of your day that would make you proud. Write it in the present tense. I wake up rested. I feel clear. I drink my tea slowly. I'm excited to work on my project. I feel purposeful. Don't worry if it's not your current reality. That's the point. This habit isn't about lying to yourself. It's about reminding yourself of what's possible. Try it tomorrow morning or tonight before bed. Even just 5 lines. and notice how your body responds. Because sometimes we don't need a new plan. We need a new feeling, one that tells us we're allowed to move towards something beautiful. Have you ever tried journaling this way? Like your dream life was already happening? I'd love to hear how it felt. Share your experience below. There was a time when the word maybe lived on the tip of my tongue. Maybe I'll go, maybe I'll try, maybe I'll ask. I used it like a shield, soft, polite, non-committal, safe. But what I didn't realize was that every maybe was slowly chipping away at my own self-trust, because underneath every vague answer was a fear of being too much, too wrong, too visible. And when you constantly leave doors half open, you start to forget what it feels like to walk through one with your whole self. The fifth habit is this: practice the habit of speaking with decisiveness. It doesn't mean you always have to be certain, but it means choosing to show up with clarity in the moment you're in. Instead of defaulting to maybe, try yes or no. Instead of I don't know, whatever works, try I'd prefer this. Every time you choose your voice over your fear of discomfort, you reclaim something powerful, your own presence. I started small. At a cafe in Santa Fe, the barista asked if I wanted oat milk or almond. Usually I'd say, oh, whichever is easier. But that day I said, oat, please. It was a tiny moment, but it landed differently in my body. I felt solid, real, like someone who takes up space without apology. From there, I started practicing it in other areas, declining invitations without over-explaining, offering my opinion even when I wasn't the loudest voice in the room, saying what I meant without layering it in hesitation. Psychologist Dr. Susan David talks about emotional agility, and one aspect of that is being able to align your words with your values. When we're indecisive out of fear, we disconnect from our values and lose the opportunity to act with integrity. But when we speak with intention, we remind ourselves that we're safe to exist, to choose, to be clear. This habit isn't about being loud. It's about being rooted. You don't need to know everything. You just need to trust that your voice belongs in the room. Practice today. Notice when maybe comes up. Pause. Ask yourself what you actually feel. Say it kindly but clearly. And watch what happens. Your posture changes. People respond differently. But most of all, you start to believe in yourself a little more. Because you're no longer waiting for the world to give you permission. You're already living like someone who's allowed to matter. Maybe no one ever told you this, but you don't have to earn the right to start living. You don't need to arrive at some perfect version of yourself before joy is allowed in. Your life isn't on hold. It's happening right now. In the tiny choices, the silent moments, the whispered yes to yourself. These habits aren't about becoming someone else. They're about unbecoming everything that taught you to wait. They're a way back to your own aliveness. Because the truth is, you were never lazy or unmotivated. You were just tired of showing up in a life that didn't feel like yours. And now you get to change that story. Not with a grand announcement, not with a 5-year plan, but with 5 quiet decisions. The clothes you put on, the 20 minutes you guard for your soul, the tiny step you commit to on Sunday, the words you write as if the dream is already breathing, and the courage to speak like you mean it. Each one is small enough to fit inside a day, but big enough to shift the way you move through the world. They remind you that your life doesn't begin after the next milestone. It begins the moment you decide to participate in it. So here's my invitation to you. Don't try to do them all. Don't let this video become another thing you should do. Just pick one. One habit that tugged at something inside you. One that made your shoulders drop or your eyes sting. Start with that and begin today. Not because you're finally ready, but because readiness was never the requirement. Presence was, and you already have that. Remember, you don't need a new life. You just need a new way of being in your life. Let this be the moment you stop waiting at the edge of your own story. Let this be the chapter where you begin again. Not because everything changed, but because you did. If this moved you, drop a like, subscribe, and send it to someone else who's been waiting to begin.